Okay, today we're going to talk about key identification. And this is David, and he's going to help learn about key identification as I try to discuss it, detail it, describe it. So if you've got a key ring and it's full of keys, you're going to have a bunch of different keys on there, and they're going to all look different, or maybe they're all going to look the same, but most likely they're going to end up looking different. And key identification comes from the perspective of determining what key is this, not what lock it works. We know it works some lock or locks. We assume that it must, but who's the manufacturer of the keyway? What system does this work in? It's like, to put it in something a little more pedestrian, if somebody walks in with a starter from a car, you're like, well, okay, well, or an alternator or a battery. Let's say it's a battery. Everybody, you can look at it and say, that's a battery. What car does this go into? So we're trying to look at the battery and know more about where that battery or that alternator or that starter is used. The key is the alternator, the starter, or the battery in this. So I've got 3 different keys here, and this one is just a Schlage. Well, I know that this is a Schlage 5-pin C keyway. Now, how do I know that? Well, I know that from experience. But the tip-off here is to determine what type of key that someone walks in and hands you. You're going to look at some key things. You're going to first look at what's called the bow. That's the bow. Absolutely, you're going to get the video. But absolutely take notes. I find writing things down allows me to reinforce it. So proceed. If you don't, okay. So the bow of the key, or what people will call the head of the key. So when anyone who sees the head of that key, they'll say, "Yep, that's Schlage for sure," and that's been the head of that Schlage key since the 1930s for sure. So that is an extremely common key blank. Now I happen to have one here, and it looks clearly different. Okay. Now, I happen to know that that is arrow. My experience tells me it's arrow. That is what an arrow bow looks like. Now, we also have a third key here, and its bow looks even different. But you can kind of, if you use your imagination, you can see that, well, maybe those are related. Turns out they are. This is another Schlage bow, but the reason I use 2 Schlage bows, and this is a genuine Schlage key, is because even if you have the same manufacturer, you could easily have a different bow. And in fact, you will have different bow shapes from the same manufacturer. An example of that would be Corbin Russwin. Corbin Russwin has been manufacturing locks since the 19th century. Over the last 130 years or so, more than that, 140 or 50 years, their bow, the shape of their bows, or their heads, but the bow has simply evolved. So when you're looking at Corbin Russwin, which used to be FPF Corbin, Russell and Irwin, blah, 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 many different bow shapes. So how you go about identifying a key, first of all, is what does the head of the key look like? What does the bow look like? And that will be your first thing. So we're really approaching this from the perspective of, you've got this key on your key ring or whatever, or a customer walks in with it, and you're just trying to learn more about it. The place you start is, what does the head of the key look like? Okay, or the bow. So that's where you're going to start, identifying the bow. After that, when you get to a situation where you're going to try to learn more about it, are there any distinguishing information? Is there anything telltale, anything distinguished? Is there anything of distinguishing information on the head of the key that tells me more about it? Well, on this blank, it sure does. It says SC1 here, and it says USA. Okay, so that's probably, USA is probably not important to know that, but meaning country of origin. But the SC1, that tells me a lot about that. Now I'm starting to learn a lot more about this. And when you have experience, when you have an idea or someone tells you which direction to go in, you can search SC1. Okay, there's nothing on the other side, but we have SC1, so that's good. But on the arrow key, it literally says arrow on it. So now you're going to say, well, let me scratch my head. I wonder who the manufacturer is. Well, it's Arrow. Arrow's been making locks for a real long time. So anything that's on the head of the key is going to be super crucial. This also gives me an A. This also gives me there are numbers on the head of on the bow of the key. So that A tells me the keyway, and those numbers, which are the bitting, they tell me the cuts that are on the key. So now I know a lot about this key. I know it's Arrow. I know it's an A keyway. Well, I know that because I know it's an A keyway, but the point I'm trying to say is you wouldn't know that that's the keyway, and we're going to talk about that. But it's information there that you can exploit to use as a clue. Basically, I'm saying I already know what the clue is because I do, but in your position, you'll say, well, Arrow, A, and then it's got some numbers. So you're trying to figure out, what is this? So one way that you could approach this is you'd call the manufacturer and say, hey, I got one of your keys in my hand. Can you help me identify this? And this is how we all learn. You call the tech support department at the manufacturer. You ask a coworker who knows more about it than you do at that point. You contact an industry, a peer that you have within the industry for help. So there's a lot about these keys that are already revealed on the key itself. Okay. Now, and this key, of course, has information on it as well. The Schlage key is fun because it actually gives us some really cool information. It says the word control on it. So that is extremely interesting that it says the word control. It's more data about what this is. A control key is a very special key, which we're not going to talk. We'll talk about all these things in order. Now, we're going to go on to talk about the key section or key profile. So this key has grooves on the side. We would say that this is the way the key has been milled. There's a tool called a milling machine that can cut tiny grooves into something. That's milled. The process is milling. The way that a key is milled talks about how is directly responsible for what we would call the keyway. So when you're looking at a key to figure out what it is, you're going to look at the keyway. And the keyway you can look at just by looking at the tip of the key. You'll see that that's got a certain profile to it. It'll kind of look like this. Would you hand me that paper that's right there? Yeah. So a keyway, basically a cylinder plug.
AED supply.
Kind of looks like that. That's a keyway in a cylinder plug. And if your key is not milled to the proper profile of the broaching in the cylinder plug, keys are milled, cylinder plugs, what you stick the key into, the female part, those are broached. There's a machine that broaches the keyway. It's super cool to see that. So the third way you identify a key is by scrutinizing or studying what is the key profile? What does it look like? This profile has been around since probably the 1930s again. It could be the 1920s, but for sure the 1930s. So the way that the profile in the plug and the milling on the key helps you identify what key it is or whose system it belongs to. When I say system, I mean the manufacturer. Is it Corbin? Is it Yale? Is it Medico? Is it Schlage? Is it one of dozens of different people? Because all you know is you got this key in your hand. What the heck is it? Studying the profile is another way that you'll determine what it is. Back in the old days, we had a board with about 25 cylinders glued to the board, and if a guy walked in, we would just start sticking it into into cylinders until that fits into a Falcon. Okay, that's got to be a Falcon standard G keyway because that's the cylinder we had there. So that's a third way that you're going to determine it. Now, a fourth way, and what can be considered the final way, is the dimensions of the key. And what that really means is the caliper is by far one of the most important tools in a woodworker or a carpenter's life, a locksmith's life. So none of these are blank, meaning these keys that I have here are cut. If it was blank, it would just go straight across all the way here. Okay, I could put my caliper on here, and I can tell you the height of the blade. the part that it's not cut. The height of that blade is 0.324. That's the height of the key blade. That tells me a lot of very important information about this key blank. Meaning, if you know that height of that key blade, you're going to be able to determine whose that is. That's a good way to approach determining whose it is. But you could also measure a cut, because I don't think you'll find on a chart the height of the blade, although you might in a key manufacturer's catalog. But I could measure the root of this, and if I suspect that it's Schlage, I could look at the Schlage depth and spacing data chart, and all this is new to you, but I'm just laying it out there. You could measure that root depth. The root depth is from the bottom of the blade to the bottom of the cut, and if that dimension that you get on your caliper is a dimension that you can find on your depth and spacing data, voila, that's more information. And then, of course, once you're very sure about once you're pretty positive about what you're dealing with, you can get yourself a cylinder from that manufacturer, and you can stick the key in there, and if it goes in and it doesn't feel like it's forced, because there can be keys that are so close that they almost or practically go in, then you're sure that you've got the right key blank. You've got the right system, I should say. You know you're dealing with Schlage. And then another thing that I would add on to that is the length. It's under dimensions, but under the length, this is a 5-pin key. I can tell that because I can tell the length of it by looking at it. I can also ask you what length it is, and you might make an educated guess and say, well, let me count the cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 cuts on this. It's what we call a 5-pin key, because there would then be at least 5 chambers, vertical chambers, within the cylinder itself that have pin tumblers in them that would sit into this. So that's another tip. What's the length of the key when it comes to dimensioning? So as you can see by the book in front of you, there are lots of different bow shapes, and indeed those are very common. I can't name them all. I can name many of them, but 17, I don't know what that is. That's 18 is probably a Kawasaki motorcycle key. Obviously you can see number 2, that's an arrow. Number 1 you may have on your key blank. It's likely the Kwikset is likely the most common of all. Number 4 is obviously the Schlage. 5, I think, I don't recall, but 6 is definitely Corbin. 7 is Russwin. 8 could be an Abus padlock, etc. 10 is Sargent. 11, I don't know. 12 could be Dexter or Falcon or Weiser. The point of the matter of 14 is small format for sure. So the point of the matter is, these are the 4 areas that help you start to determine what key blank, what system you're working in. Am I working in Corbin or am I working in Kwikset? You have to know that. All you have is an unknown key, and those 4 areas is how you can derive the data to then make your very best educated guess. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you next Friday, same time, same place. I will send you this so that you have it, and there you go.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
that was great.
It's got to be short and sweet.
Yeah. Well, that's plenty to take in as well.
If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So David, you stated that you were looking at the head of a key, which happens to be Kwikset, and you said, well, that's a house key. And I said, not necessarily. But having an educated guess as to where it is used, you're right. I said, well, that could be on the Sears Tower.
Yeah, the order as a whole.
But you're right in the sense that that Kwikset key is likely not going to be installed in a commercial application. So having an educated guess as to where it actually is used is extremely insightful. You're right. Making an educated guess. You could say the same for the Schlage key.
As for working in my previous field of movies, I did carry larger ones for the doors, because completely different keys from the office to our alcohol area.
So was there something special about the room where the alcohol was kept in terms of the key?
Just for basically 21 or over, because we did have minors working as well. So just to separate, the managers had that key only, where that key was different from any of the other doors.
What was different about it?
Just because I had it was a room full of liquor, alcohol, so that was just more of the important room. The other ones were more of stock-wise of concession merchandise, and then the food was in a different area.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, different keys, I guess, just to make it a little more secure.
But what was different about the concession room and the alcohol lockup room that you could tell by looking at the key? Was it the same bow shape?
All right. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any PO number
So-
or job name you may want?
But would it be an educated guess to say that the concession key didn't work the alcohol room key?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So, I mean, you've made a statement about key identification. There's something different about this.
Mm-hmm.
Different is data. What is it? What is different? Why is it different?
One moment.
Educated guesses.
It wouldn't be the different length, since it was,
Alright,
say,
your
if it
order's
was the same
placed.
key from the
Confirmations
same
headed to your
manufacturer,
email in just a couple
they would
moments.
all be the same.
Like I
The
said,
alcohol
lead
one
time is
wouldn't be
about 2
longer
weeks,
because the
so
concession
when
one would be
ships out,
shorter.
we'll have
It could be
check
longer.
and paid invoice
It could
sent to you.
be only because it could be, but most likely what it is
That's
this.
correct, yes.
I think we've established it's the same bow shape. What it would certainly be would be different cuts on the key.
My
And we're going to
contact information
actually
will be
probably
in the
next
footer
week.
of that email,
We
so
will get the
if you have any
key
other
kit
questions,
open in a
don't hesitate
cylinder
to reach out.
because I'm going to be referring to pin tumblers constantly, and I think you need to have now an understanding of when we say cuts on the key, what's exactly happening on the cuts on the key. How do these cuts versus different
Yep,
cuts make
may
a
take a
key
few minutes
work
to
in a
get to you.
in a cylinder
So,
where it doesn't
yeah,
work?
just,
So we'll
keep
do
on
that
looking for
next
it.
week. But for sure, if you put the concession key in that alcohol door, it don't turn. And that's because the code,
Bye-bye.
which is on our arrow key, so that says 49552. If I were to take my caliper, I could measure these 5 cuts, 49552. I could measure those. I could confirm that those are the right cuts, and then what's also interesting about identifying a key blank, if you've confirmed that 49552 is the correct code, well, guess what you can do? Cut a key. This is the guy's office. You got the code, you can cut a key. And I will say that of all of the people that I've met in this industry, locksmiths are at the top of the list in terms of ethics, because keys are extremely confidential information. I wouldn't have a key that had my code on it, because someone watching a 10-minute video, like, oh, all I got to do now is cut it. I'm even going to tell you how to cut it. So locksmiths are really the ethical, locksmiths and everyone else, but locksmiths are in daily contact with extremely confidential information. And much of the science of locksmithing is being taught how you handle that information and how you create systems that do not compromise your client security. So, concession key, lockup. Now, you know where that's extremely I was unaware of that because I never worked in a movie theater, but it makes sense. But where I do know it exists is pharmaceutical lockups in hospitals. Imagine if everyone had the key to get the, whatever it is, the Dramamine, or not Dramamine, for seasickness, but anyway, you know what I mean. Stuff that's, $100 a pill and highly addictive. So if you could get that kind of stuff with street value, so those rooms are always locked on their own. Was there anything else about the keys that in the workspace that you recognized?
No. I know that you were saying out the different ones, and I do know, said this one was a padlock, you said?
That could be an Avis padlock.
Because,
Or master.
I'm just going through all the different keys I've seen, and then just kind of trying to apply it to this way. But
Oh, no. That's exactly what you do. You use your real life, non-professional experiences from when you were 5, 6, 7 years old. That's how everyone learn.
Okay.
Everyone. No, if you've seen a key, you may have worked at a summer camp when you were 14 and you had a key for something. And now you can think back to yourself, that type of lock. I wonder,
I'm trying to to the lock is since that one sledge. I'm just trying to see, okay, which key did I have at the time?
Yeah.
But no, that's great. That helps out a lot.
So, but also what will happen under these manufacturers' names that we've mentioned, they all have multiple different millings, which is called the keyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take your house key and try to stick it into your ignition in your car, well, they're both keys and they're both cylinders, but they don't go into each other, and it's because of the milling on the key and the broaching in the cylinder. So that is the DNA. What is the milling profile on the key itself? If you know what that is, I can look at that and say, yeah, that's clearly Schlage C. So I'm not saying Schlage. I'm saying Schlage C. C is one of the original 7 classic keyways. C, E, C, E, F, E, F, G, F, G. There are 7 classic keyways in Schlage. All of their millings and broachings are different. An E won't go into a C won't go into an F. Now what's cool about that, to add on to your reference to working in a movie theater, you could have an E keyway on the alcohol lockup room, a C keyway everywhere else. That's a bad example. A CE on the alcohol room, and E on everything else, because that's Home Depot. You can get that cut at Home Depot. So let's use less common keys. Then you can have what's called a multi-section key blank. You can have the master cut on that, and then that multi-section will enter all of the cylinders. But you, as an underage employee, you only get the concession key, that E key, but the manager, who's whatever, he'll get the multi-section blank, but the bartender, let's say you got a swanky one, and the bartender, he gets only that one. He's got no reason to go to the popcorn room. He only needs to get alcohol. He'll get the CE blank. So that's for the future, a different way to talk about key blank identification, because the millings, it can say arrow on it, but arrow's got more than the A keyway. And you might look at that arrow and say, oh, it's arrow for sure. It says arrow, but it's not an A keyway because it won't go in my A keyway cylinder. Yeah. So key blank identification is based on bow shape, what information, bow shape, two. What information, so 1 is bow shape, 2 is what information you can glean off of the blank, 3, what is the profile, and then 4, what are the dimensions of the key. And you may not know the answer, but you can look at any key and derive something off of it. You can always derive dimensions. You can always derive a bow shape. So 50% of the requirements, you could see that that's got a particular shape. And then there are resources that you can draw on to help you determine, okay, get me closer. I can see that this is a particular shape, but actually what is it? So I think what we'll do in future videos is I'll go on, and then you'll go on.
Any questions I have?
That's what we'll do.
Okay.
So, all right. So here's what's going to happen. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.